Today's topic is part of social psychology, and it's the phenomenon of persuasion. Every day, the average person is exposed to between 5 and 10,000 advertisements per day, all of which are persuading you to do one thing or another. Not only is this, of course, advertisement, but we undergo a lot of other situations where one person might be trying to persuade somebody, such as in sales. So today we're going to discuss a little bit about persuasion techniques. So here are a few questions for today. And I'm going to read them over, and then you can pause for a second, think about what I've said, and then continue on and hear the rest of what I have to say. But how susceptible do you think you are to persuasion? Would you say that advertising affects your judgment about products or services to buy? What about celebrity endorsements? Do you read online reviews, either by industry critics or customers, to help you make decisions? How might you determine if a source of information is trustworthy? Are you inclined to be persuaded politically or ideologically when presented with facts contrary to your beliefs? Just going to give you a moment to think about that. If you're like most people, they'll say that they're not very susceptible to persuasion, and that things like advertising really don't affect very much. And certainly, they're harder to be swayed politically or anything like that. If anything, people are most likely to say that they do at least read a little bit of the online reviews, although some state that it won't help them make decisions or not. I'm here to say that really there's a lot of evidence to support that these things do affect people, even if they don't realize it. People spend an awful lot of money trying to persuade you to do things like spend your money in a certain place by buying certain items, as well as do stuff like how to get you to vote. People spend so much time learning how to be charismatic and learning how to manipulate other people. And there are some people who are absolute masters of that. For example, President Trump, whether you think he's great or whether you think he sucks, whatever, he is an absolute master at
For months now, people have been
persuasion
writing off Donald
persuasive
Trump's chances of being the
techniques.
president,
He
saying that
can
he's just
pretty
a
much
joke
get
or a fluke or a
anybody
fad, and
to
honestly, I used to
even
write him
vote
off
against
too.
their own
But
interests.
after looking into him, I have to say it
So
is time to
somebody actually
stop
took
laughing.
some
Because
great
if you watch to the
examples
end of this
of
video,
what he
you'll see
did
that
during the
Donald Trump
Republican
has some
primary in
incredibly effective
2016,
mental techniques and the charisma
and
to
really
influence the
used this
masses.
to
And as his
show
poll numbers are clearly showing,
how
he's got a
to
very serious
do
chance
things
of working
and
his way not
manipulate
only to
other
be the
people by
Republican
doing
nominee,
things
but the
like
president of
including
the United
controlling a room.
States. So let's understand
So I'm going
exactly
to
how
let
he's doing
him
it by looking at his
do
first
what he
technique, fear.
does
There
well
is a
and
great
to
hatred
talk about himself
toward
and control
Americans
things.
by large segments of the Muslim population. 25% agreed that violence against Americans here in the United States is justified. Sharia authorizes murder against non-believers, beheadings, and more unthinkable acts. It's going to get worse and worse. You're going to have more World Trade Centers. It's going to get worse and worse, folks.
Now, fear is an incredibly powerful emotion. Firstly, it captures our attention like no other emotion can. We focus intensely on the thing that is giving us that fear. Secondly, it shuts down higher thinking. When we're terrified by a bump in the night, we don't think rationally about the fact that it's likely just the wind. Our critical thinking skills dip as we focus simply on protecting ourselves. And thirdly, fear feels crappy. We don't like to feel afraid. So the fastest way to get out of fear and to move towards a powerful emotion is to move into anger.
When Mexico sends its people, they're not sending their best. They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists. China's taking our jobs, they're taking our money. Syrians are now being caught at the southern border. We don't know who they are, could be ISIS. Would never have made that horrible, disgusting, incompetent deal with Iran. They're a terrorist nation.
Now, notably, the outlets for this anger are always outgroups. They're never necessarily segments of the voting population. They're Sharia Muslims or Mexican rapists, people that are not going to influence this election. And he sets it up so that if you disagree with him, you are on the side of the other. You are anti-American life. It's a very powerful position for him to take, even if it statistically doesn't make any sense with what's actually going on in the world. Now, with this fear that Donald has created, he takes a next step, and that is to imply and basically say that no one else will keep you safe.
Do you think this is tough and you're not being treated
This
fairly?
isn't tough and easy.
Imagine what it's going to be like dealing with Putin, or dealing with President Xi, or dealing with the Islamic terrorism that exists. This is a tough business to run for president.
No, you're a tough guy, Jeb.
And we need to have a leader that is principled. You're never going to be president of the United States by insulting your way to the presidency.
Let's see, I'm at 42 and you're at 3, so far I'm doing better.
Doesn't matter.
So far I'm doing better. You know, you started off over here, Jeb. You're moving over further and further. Pretty soon you're going to be off the end.
This doesn't do a
Now, this might strike you as schoolyard bullying, and honestly, it is, but it has a very effective way of communicating that Donald Trump is the dominant force in any interaction that he has had in these debates with Jeb Bush, and the poll numbers reflect that. Jeb, with every single advantage, has plummeted. Here's another example of Donald Trump absolutely running over Jeb Bush at a presidential debate. And now pay attention to the number of crutch words that Jeb uses compared to Donald, the way that Jeb's face looks when Donald cuts him off. Donald comes across as the dominant personality in this interaction.
It doesn't work for anybody on this stage.
I was a businessman. I got along with Clinton. I got along with everybody. That was my job, to get along with people.
But the simple fact is...
Excuse me. 1 second.
No.
I didn't want to...
Donald, you cannot take...
More energy tonight. I like that. Look.
I was asked the question...
If you notice, Jeb is looking at Trump the entire time, while Trump never even looks in his direction. He's going to talk no matter what.
I didn't want... It was my obligation as a businessman to my family, to my company, to my employees.
Now, this might come across to you as a complete jerk move, but what people see behind that is strength, because honestly, Jeb Bush's personality cannot compete with the dominance of Donald Trump's. And now Trump has set it up such that he's created this climate of intense fear, and he's also made his opponents look completely inept when it comes to handling it, because they can't even handle him on stage. So he sets himself up as the logical strongman, and then promises Americans what they crave most deeply, which is a return to dominance, a return to that situation where we don't have to be afraid because we have the strong man leading us, and which in turn makes us feel more powerful. And he spells that sentiment out exactly when he says no one is going to mess with us.
I will rebuild our military. It will be so powerful and so great that we'll never have to use it. Nobody's going to mess with us, folks. Nobody. Nobody. Nobody's going to mess with us.
So there you go, Donald promising total dominance. Nobody's ever gonna mess with us. Here's another example of Donald Trump's style of black and white, everything you ever dreamed of rhetoric.
We're going to start winning so much that you're going to get used to winning instead of getting used to losing. Whether it's military, whether it's trade, healthcare, we always lose. We're going to always win again.
And you see here where most politicians might acknowledge that with effort and compromise you can achieve a certain goal, Donald Trump promises us what we really want, which is to win in every arena, every time, guaranteed. This is the 6-minute abs version of politics. Does it work? No. But do people buy it in droves? Absolutely. Now, this tactic of creating an atmosphere of fear, presenting yourself as a strongman, and promising the world is actually very, very common in the world of politics. The problem is it makes you extremely vulnerable. Lots of people are going to be attacking you from the other side, and if you're ever seen as weak, you come across as a hypocrite who cannot deliver on their promises. One of the most fascinating things about Donald Trump is that he's always presenting himself as a winner, and the most basic way that he does this is through social proof. So take a look at these clips just from his opening remarks at one of the debates.
But I began it talking about other things, and those things are things I'm very good at, and maybe that's why I'm center stage. People saw it, people liked it, people respected it. People like what I say, people respect what I say.
So you see over and over again that Trump emphasizes that he is a winner, that he has been a winner. He quotes his poll numbers. He gets the best of the debates in most exchanges. But there's always going to be those situations where somebody gets the best of him. And as a strongman, he can't afford that, which is where one of his most incredible skills comes in, and that is deflection with humor. Watch what happens in this next clip as the audience starts to boo.
Let me just tell you something, and you know because you just saw the numbers yourself. NBC Wall Street Journal just came out with a poll. Headline,
Trump way up, Cruz going down.
There he goes again, quoting his winning poll numbers. Now see how he deals with the boos.
I mean, so you can't, they don't like the Wall Street Journal, they don't like NBC, but I like the poll. And frankly, it just came out, and...
Now watch that. They were just booing him. He cracks this joke, people laugh, and watch how quickly the sentiment of the crowd changes.
In Iowa now, as you know, Ted, in the last 3 polls, I'm beating you. So, you shouldn't misrepresent how well you're doing with the polls.
So that is the power of laughter. It is a pattern interrupt. You can't stay booing and upset and angry when somebody makes you uncontrollably laugh. It also makes you more receptive to whatever comes next that somebody has to say because they've already started to lead you emotionally. So what Donald Trump is doing here is using laughter to take control of situations where he's starting to lose control. And what that does for him is it effectively helps him dodge any points that you make against him because he can almost erase them with a laughing crowd. This also works for ducking very pointed attacks like this one that you might have already seen on YouTube.
You've called women you don't like fat pigs, dogs, slobs, and disgusting animals. Your Twitter account...
Only Rosie O'Donnell.
No, it wasn't.
And you hear Megyn Kelly here. Her point is getting drowned out. Obviously, it was more than just Rosie O'Donnell, but because Donald has made the audience crack up, the entire point gets lost. It gets dismissed as ludicrous, which is what Donald goes on to say in his answer. It was just a joke, yada, yada, yada. And people have accepted that at this point because he made them laugh. Now, it's not just through laughter that Donald Trump is able to avoid talking about any of the contentious issues in his record. In fact, one of the most popular ways for him that he's able to avoid engaging in any sort of reasonable debate about the things that he has said and done is by simply acting superior to them. So in this clip, Jeb is levying some charges against him. Watch Donald's face as he listens. He doesn't look at Jeb, and really he just has this complete look of disbelief and disgust, which communicates to the audience this is ludicrous. He doesn't even have to defend himself.
That ISIS was not our fight just 2 months ago. He said that Hillary Clinton would be a great negotiator with Iran, and he gets his foreign policy experience from the shows. That is not a serious kind of candidate. We need some...
So take that sort of nonverbal communication and contrast that with the reverse when Donald Trump goes and attacks Jeb Bush and see if you have a sense of how Jeb feels about it.
The trouble that we're now, and by the way, Jeb, you mentioned Boeing. Take a look. They order planes. They make Boeing build their plant in
So notice how Jeb is looking at Donald. It's clear that he is ready to react to him.
China. They don't want them made here. They want those planes made in China. That's not the way the game is supposed to be played.
You see that frustrated, tight look on Jeb's mouth. Basically what's going on here is that Donald is leading Jeb. Jeb appears to be reacting to him, which he is. And this is where that communication of strength goes through. Donald Trump sets the tone. Even when he's losing, he's able to reverse it with laughter. He acts superior to accusations against him. And then the people around him can't seem to deal with the accusations that he levies against him. So I want to show one more clip of Donald Trump now dealing with a situation where somebody actually does get the better of him just for a moment. And in this clip, the situation is that they've just asked the candidates what their code name would be if they were to win president. Donald has been going at Jeb for being low energy, and Jeb responds.
Ever ready. It's very high energy, Donald.
So Jeb gets in a zinger. And look at that. Jeb slaps his hand like a little kid walks up to a teenager when he extends his hand to be slapped. It's ridiculous. Donald is able to take control of this situation. He clearly sees that Jeb has won the audience with this little joke. And so, rather than trying to make it a super serious thing, he makes himself a player in the funny game. And watch now as he one-ups even what Jeb did.
Mr. Trump?
Humble.
That's a good one.
And again, here we have Jeb reacting very much. It becomes Donald's game that everyone else is reacting to. And it's this way that we get the sense that Donald is the leader. So you combine the atmosphere of fear that he's created with the fact that he seems to be the leader in so many ways. He promises this sense of dominance, of a return to not having to worry about what's going to happen because he's going to lead and be protective over the nation. And what you've got is someone who is very, very powerful. Add to that this thing that he seems to be like Teflon. Whenever something comes at him, he can divert or deflect with a joke. He's in a very, very powerful position. Now, we still have yet to see what goes on with these Republican primaries, but don't count Trump out just because you think this is a fluke. In terms of charismatic personalities, he has everyone else in the field beat, whether you like it or not. And truth be told, there's a lot more that I found on him that I just didn't have space for in this video. So if you'd like to see that stuff, let me know in the comments and maybe I'll do another follow-up video. Of course, subscribe if you want to be the first to know whenever we release a new video, which is typically every Monday morning, sometimes more often than that. And of course, if you're interested in going deeper into the topic of confidence and in terms of finding out the things that you can do inside of 60 seconds to boost your own confidence, whether it's before a speech that you have to give or meeting someone that might be important, you can click the link that will pop up now. It'll take you to another page where you pop in an email, and we've set up a video that gives you the number one thing that I do to feel more confident inside of 60 seconds that you can take as well. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope that you subscribe. Let me know other stuff that you'd like to see in the comments, and I will see you in the next video.
Okay, so he actually, is done, and I'm sure he did post other things, but I don't have facts. I'm not looking for him to post everything. But yeah, so this guy is an absolute master of these various persuasive techniques, and all of these did allow him to win the primary, eventually win the election, and well, he didn't make it the next election, but he at least made that one. So really, what is persuasion? And that's really the way that any type of message changes your belief, your attitude, or whatever behavior that you might have. There are several different ways of doing this, really, and we're going to get into them. But here are two examples. So Rock the Vote was a campaign that started when I was in elementary school. It started in like 1990. And this whole thing is to get young people to get registered to vote and then to go out and actually vote. The whole thing about this, given it was doing stuff like on MTV, also back when they actually did music, they had good celebrity sponsors, and they basically made voting, cool. And they used their whole marketing thing to convince you to be part of the in-group and to go vote. I think it probably worked fairly well. I do know a lot of people my age that did start voting fairly young. And that was probably partially because of Rock the Vote, amongst other things. If you look at this giant gorilla on this other side with this huge sail thing, that's a whole nother story. He is using various forms of keywords to get you to come in and to hopefully snag a sale after you come in. Words like sale, words like going out of business, all of these draw people in. It attracts attention. They want to go in and see, if there are any good deals. Stuff like the word clearance. Even if the things are not actually on sale or labeled as clearance, people are still going to go there and think that they're getting a deal, even when they, in fact, might not be. There are two general ways of persuasion, and this includes the central route or the peripheral route. Both of them are very important when you're discussing persuasion. Now, the central route is very direct. It is that direct logical message. Now, I'm really not sure what things say here on the central thing, because it is in Russian and I don't read it. But based on what I'm seeing, I'm assuming that it's things like how it affects your brain, how smoking affects your brain, how it affects your lungs, your heart, perhaps discoloration of nails, skin, and I'm sure various other things. In the path off to the side, it actually is supposed to list everything. This central route of persuasion is a very, very direct, logical message, and it assumes people are motivated to learn more about this, and that's really what that comes down to. I would say about 10% of information is probably coming through the central route. We do know that something like 90% of all communication is through body language, and that's not the central route. The central route is very much a very direct statement of what people are saying. And if you ever paid a lot of attention to people who are getting up to speak, you will notice that if somebody says something and that body language doesn't agree with it, you're more likely to discredit that. Because a lot of the information we get is through that peripheral route. And that peripheral route is very, very superficial. It is very much, frequently it can be common sense, and it's usually pretty indirect. And in order to influence people in this route, the targets, unlike the central route, which you're making an assumption that they are invested at some level, the peripheral route, they really don't want you to think too much about it. So this is another smoking thing, smoking advertisement, and with a very lovely young lady, and she's making a lot of implications that she's healthy. The lollipop could also be a sexual innuendo. I'm not sure what they're going for exactly with that one. Not that I can read it because it's also in Russian, but that peripheral route, a lot of people really, really go after, and it is very, very persuasive. So while you looked at Trump, and certainly what he said was also very, very much the central route. Look at his body language, how he presents himself, even what they said about him, him and Jeb doing the high five thing. That was also very, a lot of subservience from Jeb that he was giving to Trump. So it's kind of no wonder why Trump won that particular situation. But both of these routes are very important to know about and to be aware of. So going back to those two ads, do you see how one approach might work better for one message, but maybe not another? Do you think an ad promoting cigarettes would benefit from a direct logical argument? On the other hand, would an ad against smoking be more or less effective using unappealing imagery instead of health-related, fact-based information? Well, I would say that it probably ends up usually working at least a little bit better in that peripheral route. But as far as an ad against smoking be more or less effective using imagery, it probably would be. You can certainly combine them both. Health-related facts would appeal to a subsection. Certainly, imagery would probably appeal to another subsection as well, depending on how invested they are in learning about the material and how much they are in fact thinking. And, you can say similar things about promoting cigarettes. Likely, if you're promoting cigarettes, you're probably not going to go for much of a direct route either, because it just doesn't seem that it would make sense. Of course, you might have a different feeling on those matters. One of the things about persuasion is something called a fixed action pattern, which is this behavior that occurs the same way, in the same order every time that it is called out. For I'm sure much of our lives, we've always heard that phrase "for a good cause," and we've been trained to, when we hear that, give whatever they're asking for, like a dollar, a few cents, whatever it is. And that is one of those things what we need to be aware of, that if somebody says something for a good cause and you give them money, do you often actually hear about what that cause is or what that cause is not? A lot of times you will not. Another trigger phrase is this word "because." this lady, I believe she was at Harvard, did a study. It was an observational study, and she went into I think it was a library, and she was discussing basically trying to get to the copy machine. And she would watch people, and then she would get up and ask if she could cut in line. Now, when she didn't give a reason, still about 60% of people said, "Oh, sure, go right ahead," because she, I guess, was nice about it. I don't know. However, if she went up and said, "Can I cut in front of you because," and maybe that was, "I'm in a hurry," maybe that was, "I only have 5 things," or whatever, it would turn out that somewhere between 80 and 90% of people would let her cut through just because she used the word "because." So we are very much trained for some of these situations. And I challenge you to be aware of when these are being used on you. What are some qualities that you feel make someone persuasive? There are a lot of things that might individually make somebody persuasive. That could be some of the things that we're going to be talking about. It could also be how they're dressed, their body language, perhaps their emotion in their voice. It could be a situation if you are in public and face-to-face, it might be something like eye contact as well. But those aren't the only qualities. So sources of persuasion, really, we're looking at things like the Triad of Trust. That's what it's called. And the triad consists of authority, honesty, and likability, all 3 of which we're going to discuss in a moment. Do you trust this man? Well, if you're like many people, you probably would at least listen to what he has to say. And why is that? Well, he's a doctor, or at least he's dressed like one. Now, that alone signifies a possible sense of authority because we were always told to listen to doctors. However, if you look at him, he is definitely a model and definitely not an actor. For example, if you've watched the previous thing about one of the previous lectures on Milgram that mentioned Milgram, you would notice that he's wearing a white coat because we associate that with authority figures, scientists, physicians, etc. Now, if he was a real doctor, this would probably be embroidered with his name. He doesn't have a badge or an ID. His stethoscope, let's be quite frank, is not one that we would be using. I've worked in medicine an awful long time, and that is nothing like any of them that we would use. That looks like a single-headed stethoscope, and it definitely looks like a prop stethoscope and not a real one, or at best, a toy. You might be able to do a little bit with it, but probably not that much. Because he's not, normally we would look for a Littman, a nice double-headed thing. That's actually what physicians usually use. Also, if you look at this x-ray, first of all, he's not even looking at the x-ray. He's kind of pointing vaguely. I'm assuming somebody injured themselves, look like maybe an ankle break. But he's not holding this correctly. He's not doing pretty much anything correctly, to be honest. But yet people are going to trust what he has to say, simply because of how he's presenting himself. People love using actors to play doctors to go on commercial, because people automatically have that sense of authority. And in fact, people used to get doctors who I shouldn't say doctors, but fake doctors, as in these actors were playing doctors, and they would get them to come and be spokesmen for whatever they were doing, because people already associated them so much as physicians, even though, of course, they were not. So be aware of things like that if you ever see this situation. But here are some additional problems with this whole concept of authority. We have to say, what makes us trust authority? Quite frankly, that's conditioning from a young age to trust certain people and certain, or maybe not certain people. And authority tends to signify stuff like status, power, and knowledge. Now, there are a lot of problems with this. Even the best authority figure who maybe have great intentions, they can still be wrong. That's a huge issue. But people will take what they say as gospel, even if they're incorrect. They also may be an authority in one area, but maybe not in the area that's being asked. For example, a biologist might not have an expertise in astronomy, nor would an astronomer not necessarily have much of an information about psychology. Everybody might have PhDs, but that doesn't mean it transfers to another area. Further, it's very easy to set yourself up as I don't want to say an illegitimate authority, but an authority figure that has no credentials. For example, a badge in a police officer can be faked. A doctor can be faked just by putting on a really bad stethoscope and a white coat. So you always have to be very, very careful about this situation with authority. The other source of persuasion is honesty. This is Martha Stewart. She was known as being one of the most trustworthy people basically in the world. And then she got busted for insider trading, which is a felony. So she lost a whole lot of her base of honesty, and she's having to rebuild that. This is that moral dimension that people think of. Well, maybe the expertise is that kind of cognitive dimension. Honesty is very moral. Brands want to make sure that their spokesperson really comes across as honest, because that signals to anybody who's around that this is a safe brand. These people are, of course, are going to tell you the truth. Why would they lie? But this is a huge issue. People spend so much trying to get the most honest people in and try to maintain that image to the best of their ability. Another one is kind of like an emotional connection, and that's likability. These two people are two of the most likable people in Hollywood. I can't say very much about them. I don't know any of them, so I really can't say. One of them is Justin Timberlake, is my understanding. We have Jennifer Lawrence. But likability is a huge thing. If you like somebody, you're also more likely to trust them, and you're more likely to be persuaded by them. So there you go. Here's your joke. How can you tell when a salesperson is lying? His lips are moving. Here's one way that people try to really get you to do things, and that's things like getting these testimonials or celebrity endorsements. People really love testimonials. In fact, they say the first thing you do if you get a business is to go out and get some testimonials to put on your website before you do anything else. These people may not have ever been clients of yours. So that's one thing. There's also a related thing called celebrity endorsements. This is John Wood, a race car driver, and the odds are good that he probably has never been in the Air Force. Just saying. However, NASCAR does appeal to a certain demographic that is more likely to, say, join the military. And by him plastering all this Air Force stuff all over his car, they're one of his sponsors, obviously, he might persuade some of fans who really like him to, if they're going to go into the military, to consider the Air Force instead. Whether it works or not, I really can't say. at all, to be honest with you. And this whole concept of celebrity endorsements, they've had some studies on this as well, and it's kind of interesting. There was a study that was done by the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, had 400 students, well, 400 children, I guess they were students too, ages 8 to 14. And they were shown this commercial with either a celebrity endorsement from a race car driver, a real racing footage, or both the endorsement and the racing footage. The kids who were exposed to the endorsement thought that the celebrity endorsing was more knowledgeable about the toys themselves. And all of the kids, all kids that were in that condition did believe that. And that was probably a fair amount of kids, and it didn't really matter their age. They also believed that the toys were bigger than the real race car, and they were also less likely to believe that the commercial was staged because they trusted the celebrity to tell them the correct thing. So this is definitely something that you should consider anytime you see these. Another persuasive technique is to present the message as education. If you ever see or hear somebody say something like, "I'm not a salesman, I'm a product consultant," they're in fact a salesperson. I'm saying that right now. They will take their time, and they will take their time with you and to educate you not only about their product, but potentially their competitors. And this can actually do a lot of good. They might certainly tell you the benefits or the flaws. They may, of course, withhold information as well. But they've found that even if that salesman does not make the sale, if you spend time with the client is more likely to come back to you for a potential bigger sale down the road. So it's actually helpful even if they don't buy from you, because you'll probably get a sale later down the road, because at this point now they've built a rapport, they trust you a little bit more. Word of mouth is a very popular way of getting advertising. It is really one of the best. For those of you who are out there who have to go perhaps make your own decision as to what doctor you need to visit, most college students aren't quite there yet, but 70% of people are more likely to choose a doctor based on what their friends' opinions are. A woman might say to her lady friends, "Hey, do you guys know I need a new gynecologist?" And there's a good chance that she's going to take these recommendations into account when she's making her final decision. 70% of people may use word of mouth to choose a physician. Now, for a bigger ticket purchase, that number actually increases to 91%. 91% of people are able to either get a word of mouth opinion direct from a friend, or they read the online reviews and use that to take into account. And word of mouth, there's no rule stating that you have to personally know the person you are getting the recommendation from necessarily. It's just online reviews count as that. So 91% of people are using these online reviews or whatnot to purchase a bigger ticket item. So if you are building a business, really do start to rely on that word of mouth if you can. It'll be very helpful. There's also this concept of the maven. The maven is actually a Yiddish word that kind of means expert. It doesn't actually have a direct translation, but it's basically this expert. And the rough equivalent in, at least nowadays in 2021, is this concept of social influencer. A maven, due to their knowledge about one thing, usually can pass on that information to several other people. With the rise in social media, like I said, Now one person could reach 1 million people, and probably fairly easily as well. Social influencers, they take, situations, they might get comped rooms, they might get comped food. So because all of this, because really the business owners know that these people are going to post something on their Instagram or put it on Facebook or whatever they do, and that's going to attract more business. So it ends up being worth it for them to comp whatever they get comped, because all this stuff will roll over. People are going to be more likely to reach out to, because this particular person made those suggestions. Other tricks of persuasion include the reciprocity one, social proof, getting a foot in the door, a door in the face, and that's not all. The sunk cost trap, and scarcity and psychological reactants. We're going to go through each one of those one by one. Reciprocity is when we feel compelled to repay what another person has given us. For example, if I buy your meal this week, you're more likely to buy my meal the following week. It's a whole give and take situation. Businesses are also aware of this. For example, that sign that says free coffee today. Well, coffee really doesn't take much to make, to be honest. It's just water and really a little bit of flavoring. But if they offer you free coffee, you might be more likely to go in. While you're in there, you're actually more likely to make a bigger sale than to just go in for the coffee, because really, who does that? You're more likely to perhaps buy some cookies, buy a meal, or at the very least, you'll remember this and come back later to get more coffee when it's more expensive. And that they're very much aware of that. Or even if you just see the free coffee, well, maybe you come in there and say, oh, I don't really want coffee. Maybe you want something else, which might be a little bit higher price. Either way, that attracted you to come in and spend more money. So that really is another way to do reciprocity in the business world. Social proof. We've all seen things like this. People love us on Yelp, or the I voted stickers. Personally, I'm not a big fan of Yelp. I'm kind of upset with them for a variety of reasons. The I voted stickers, all of you guys, have probably seen these. You may already have had them, but all of these is evidence that other people are doing things too, and thus you should do it as well. This people love us on Yelp, first of all, signals to other people that a lot of people have come to visit and that people love them. I mean, I suppose you could look up the reviews. Now, Yelp has a lot of problems. Not all of the reviews get shown unless you actually pay them. If you are paying them, all your positive reviews will be shown. If you are not paying them, they're more likely to show your negative reviews as well. But just simply paying them and having people see all those reviews, they are more likely to do things like that. For example, with this people love us on Yelp thing, if people go in and they do decide to leave a review, they're more likely to leave a 4 or 5 stars as opposed to a low review, just because everybody else is has high stars on the thing. So I voted stickers, that is really telling people to get out and go. Don't you want to be cool like me? I went out and did my duty. Why don't you do yours as well? That's an important persuasive technique. That's really minimal to do. It costs very little, but that does sometimes convince other people to go out and vote as well. So now we have something called foot in the door, which is part of commitment and consistency. This is that situation where people ask you for a very small request, which leads to something bigger, bigger, and bigger. That whole thing, that big request, has always been the target. they only did these small steps because they knew it would lead you there. When somebody asks you for your phone number at a store or your zip code, if you're paying by credit card, well, they probably already know your zip code anyway, but it does make it much easier for them to search you out, find your address, and basically make much more targeted things to you, even if they don't have your full billing address, mailing address. There are also situations like, can you please sign this petition? And then they ask for, okay, well, now that you've signed that, why don't you share this petition? Why don't you donate $5? Why don't you do this? And eventually those requests will also get larger and larger as well. Other examples of the foot in the door technique is if you guys have ever gone to a friend's wedding that maybe they got married in a church that has a lot of missionaries. I would recommend not signing the guest book. If you sign the guest book, there's a very good chance that within a few days or a few weeks, you're going to have a missionary at your house. That small request of signing the guest book really doesn't take much energy, really at all. But now they have all your information and they're going to continue coming up to you because the real purpose was basically to convert you, which was their goal. So always be aware of who has your information. Another path to persuasion is this concept of the foot in the door. In this case, you go off and you get immediately rejected, and then you try to offer a compromise. Now, I don't know that many people who would complete a 2-hour survey unless they were getting paid for it, to be honest. But if you say, hey, if somebody says, hey, will you complete this 2-hour survey? The odds are good you're going to hear no. But if you later say, okay, well, what about just a 15-minute part of the survey that's just the most important parts? 90% of people are going to agree to that, at least that 15-minute survey, as opposed to if you asked about the 15-minute survey ahead of time. That is what this concept of a door in the face is. So also always be aware of that as well. Not sure how many people still remember Billy Mays. He was one of the greatest salespeople of our time, and his whole catchphrase was, "And that's not all." He was very known for a lot of these infomercials that were done, when I was growing up, including stuff like OxyClean, which is on his shirt there. He did several others as well. And with his main shtick was, here is this thing, here is the price, and I'm just going to make something up because I can't remember what the costs are. But let's say that you have a thing of OxyClean, and he says it's $20, it's always $19.99, and he starts to talk about the wonders of OxyClean, and it's $19.99, and then he pauses, and then he fakes a message from the producer or director or whatever, manager, and says, hey, so for the limited time offer, you can actually get this for $9.99, or if you or it could be buy one get one free, or it'd be okay, or you'll get two OxyClean for $19.99. The fact is that it was always the $10 for things, but he is trying to make that seem bigger and better, and this really works. Sometimes they'll also do another, like I said, another bonus product. Maybe it's another one of them. Maybe it's some other random gadget. I can't remember what he used to do. I do remember OxyClean was sometimes 2 for 1, quote unquote. But he made millions of dollars doing this. He started off basically doing little sales as like a young kid or something on like a boardwalk, and he became this multi-millionaire salesperson, and that's where he started all of this. So of course always be aware of, and that's not all. especially if that guy's selling the product. Although, quite frankly, he's dead now, but still his face is out there. There's also this other method of persuasion of this sunk cost trap. And the sunk cost really refers to throwing good money after bad, or good time after a bad time. For example, that could be maybe you don't like certain flavors of coffee, you bought a thing anyway by accident or whatever. Instead of throwing it away or giving it to somebody, well, I bought it, I'm going to use it. So you finish it up even if it sucks, because you don't want to feel like you're wasting money. For another situation could be that you're in a class, you know you're failing it, because you slacked off the first part of the semester, and instead of dropping the class, which you should have done, you continue to stay in there. You're probably just going to end up failing still, but now you're in this situation. Another situation is, example could be stock. Maybe you spent $100 on a stock, it's actually dropping. You're not selling it where you should have sold it, and instead you hold on to it until it actually becomes completely useless. So you could have just sold that, cut your losses, and continued on. So that's another example. But people didn't want to lose the money they already had. But that's certainly one of many examples. There are lots more you could also go for as well. Another technique or pathway is that of scarcity, which plays upon a fear that something is limited or may become unavailable. That's what they're really going for. If you've ever seen a mattress store, they always claim they're going out of business. If a business is truly going out of business, they'll probably only have 1 or 2 months. A mattress store might be going out of business, quote unquote, for years. And this is all a play to get you to come into the store. Basically this whole concept of going out of business or anything, anytime it deals with scarcity, it always includes this thing called a call to action, which in this case, going out of business, come in and get the inventory because it's the best deal you're ever going to get. A call to action for Disney, because Disney was always a big fan of saying, oh, so here's a movie. It's only going to be out on VHS or DVD or whatever for a limited time, and then it goes back in the Disney vault. Well, that's obviously an artificial scarcity. They can release it the whole time, but they are playing to that to go and get these movies, which frequently are anyway still available on Disney, the TV station, now Disney Plus. But that is a call to action to go out and buy these before they disappear, and frequently that's actually mentioned directly in the commercial itself. Other situations with scarcity includes diamonds. Diamonds are not rare. They only just release a few of them at a time because they're trying to keep the basically there's a monopoly going, and they're trying to keep that price really, really high. But they are still saying that things are very scarce. But they really aren't. Here's another one, is this whole concept of psychological reactants. And this frequently has something to do with scarcity as well. And that is that tendency to assert our freedom when we think others are attempting to control us. So for those who remember the Harry Potter situation in Cobb County in Georgia, they attempted to ban Harry Potter. And I believe it was only from the school libraries. This created an international huge amount of, I don't even know what was going on, because every place started basically having this run on Harry Potter, because now everybody felt that the government was trying to control them. So I can almost guarantee you almost every student in Cobb County probably had a copy of all of the books. Other things include this whole concept of, and this goes back to scarcity, what we're currently dealing with at the moment in 2020, it's about 6 of the Dr. Seuss books are going out of print. The estate is saying some of these are no longer appropriate, and they're no longer going to allow them to remain in print. And right now we have a whole bunch of people, because people want the books. So first of all, there's the scarcity situation, and also that they're upset because their freedoms are being trampled because they're not being allowed to purchase them. They're going out and they're finding all of the books. And this is a reaction to that. And another reaction that's frequently used with this, which also ties back to scarcity, is every time it looks like a Democrat is going to win an election, the NRA used to say, oh, the Democrats are going to try to get your guns. The government has never done anything really about pistols, muskets, or anything else. The Second Amendment is pretty clear. The only thing they've really done is say, can we not have automatic weapons, or make it much harder to get? That's all they've said. But every time that a Democrat does get elected, or looks like they're going to be elected, there is a run on guns, a run on ammunition, because everybody's stocking up. So they're able to actually produce a higher price. But people are very adamant that everyone's going to come and get our guns. The only people that are really noticing and really caring about this are the gun companies, who purposely are setting this up because they know they'll make a lot of sales. They're laughing pretty much all the way to the bank because they are counting on this psychological reactance. So defending against persuasion. Just like a vaccine, there is a concept of inoculation. And that's basically a weak version of a persuasive message, which can, well, make people less vulnerable to stronger versions. If you've ever done something like debate, you probably have seen something similar. In debate, sometimes they'll tell you to find out what your opponent will say, basically, and then defend against it in your own argument, and then can just continue with your own argument. This has been shown to make the person less likely to be persuaded to the stronger thing, the stronger versions of that one argument. For example, if let's say you're into hybrid cars, electric cars, or whatever, and you have people in your family that don't really see things that way, and you say, well, I'm going to get an electric car or whatever because the gas costs are crazy. Well, your family members might say, well, I have enough money. So that's a really weak argument. Another argument they could do is, okay, well, they could pollute stuff. And they would say, well, that's okay because I can clean it up. These weak arguments have already made it so much more challenging to persuade them to anything else. For example, they might say, eventually it might be in a situation where where whatever is now affecting their kids, grandkids. They're still not going to believe it because they've already been inoculated against the weaker messages. At that point, they actually stop caring, and they've already tuned you out. You can see this a lot with stuff like the anti-maskers nowadays in 2021. Other ways to defend against persuasion is this concept of stinging, which is how to draw an individual's attention to how they've been persuaded. And hopefully, this will make them more immune to that type of persuasion in the future at the very least. Now, there are lots of other ways of trying to defend against persuasion, but these two are two of the probably the best ways of doing it, depending on which way you're really trying to do it and how you are trying to persuade people as well. But all in all, this whole concept of persuasion is such an important topic, and it's very good to be aware of of all of this. I would also strongly recommend anybody to go off and consider taking a logic course, because that can actually help further your defense against unwanted persuasion as well, because you'll learn even more about how to do that, and certainly you will be much less likely to do anything that is not in your own best interest at that time. So here are some discussion questions. What makes us trust authority? Why would you trust a professor and not anybody off the street who stands up in front of the class and speaks? What makes an authority figure's take on things reliable, and how do you judge that reliability? Now that we've established that effective persuasion depends on trust, and that trust arises from three characteristics: perceived authority, honesty, and likability, how might we use that knowledge to our advantage if we are so inclined? Also, what are some phrases we might commonly see in advertisement that either explicitly asserts or implies scarcity? If you again have any other questions, well, please drop a note, do whatever you need to do to get a hold of me. I am always listening.